Hey buds, today we're going to do something different and we are going to have a guest on this episode and she is going to teach us how to make a delicious Brazilian snack out of tapioca flour. And tapioca flour is gluten-free, so she's also going to discuss a little about why you might want to eat gluten-free and what gluten actually is. She is a dietitian who lives and works here in Saskatchewan, and she mentored me while I was learning to be a dietitian, but she was born and raised in Brazil. Hence the Brazilian recipe for today. So she's going to come on over here and she's going to teach me how to say what we're going to make. So
hello. So today we're going to make Brazilian. It's called Pão de Queijo, meaning cheesebread.
Pão de Queijo.
Yes, there you go.
All right. So what first is gluten?
Gluten is a protein found in certain types of grains, and as an example would be wheat, barley, rye, and oats are included in there sometimes because they themselves are not gluten containing grains, but once they're processed in the same plant where these other grains that have gluten are done, there is contamination, so therefore you can't say that they are gluten-free anymore.
Okay. And so why would you want to worry about gluten? Why would someone want to eat gluten-free?
Okay, so some people, it's a very small amount of the population, about 1%, they are not tolerant to gluten because they do react as an,
An immune response, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
as an immune response. So once there is an immune response to gluten, what happens in the gut is there's a lot of inflammation, and that really flattens out the gut, limiting the amount of nutrients you can absorb.
Right.
Yeah, so that is why the gluten-free diet is necessary for those who are diagnosed with celiac disease. There is another part of the population that is sensitive to gluten, but who are not necessarily celiac.
Right.
So they might benefit from removing gluten from their diets, but they're not diagnosed.
Okay.
So the only way to diagnose celiac disease is through a biopsy of the gut. So that's
fun.
yeah, that needs to be done through, your medical professional.
Not a do-it-yourself kind of thing?
No, and if you are suspecting that you have a gluten sensitivity or that you're celiac because it runs in your family, as an example, it's always the best thing to do is to go to your doctor first. Don't start a gluten-free diet right away, because that's going to make it much more difficult to diagnose whether you do have the disease or not.
Right. Yeah, I've known some people that I think needed to get the testing and they had been off gluten and then they got to go back, and that's just really uncomfortable for everybody, I think, right?
That's for sure.
Now, as a kid, the only exposure I had to tapioca was the little tapioca pearls. But so, is there a plant that just spits those out, or where does tapioca come from?
Yes, they don't come in pearl forms. They come from the cassava plant, which is a root that grows in warm countries, including South American countries like Brazil. And it's a very common food that we have in the country. And we do make different recipes out of tapioca flour. So the tapioca flours that we find here in North America, they can come from different parts like Thailand, Nigeria, and so forth. But we need to make sure that they say gluten-free, because again, there could be contamination depending on what products are being processed in the same plant.
So one of the beautiful things about the recipe you're going to show us is that it's already made with tapioca flour, because that's a common ingredient there. It's not something that's been retrofitted to be gluten-free. It already was.
Yes, it already was, and works wonderfully, because gluten really, that's what gives that spongy texture to different preparations with wheat flour, as an example.
Yeah.
But once you remove the gluten, that is gone, and you just get a really dry and chalky type of preparation.
It can be a challenging thing to substitute for, hey? But the tapioca flour has some of the similar characteristics.
Yeah, it's really rubbery texture in a
Chewy,
way.
right?
Chewy, yes,
Right?
that's very true. So that's what gives that really nice texture. Like it's crusty outside and really it's not rubbery again? What is it?
Chewy.
Chewy, yes, that's the chewy texture.
All right, well, I look forward to giving it a try. On to the next steps.
Hello, so we're going to be making the cheese bread, the Brazilian cheese bread called Pão de Queijo. So here we have 12 cups of tapioca flour, and what we need to do next is add boiling milk and some oil, but until it starts boiling, the other ingredients that we need is cheese, and you can use grated cheese, any kind that you want. And if you're using just grated cheese, maybe 3 cups is a good measurement. But if you're using Parmesan cheese as an example, which is drier and finer, you may want to use 2 cups. So I think now we can go there and check the boiling milk. Okay, so here we are. Now our milk is piping hot. So it's 3 cups of milk that you need to boil. And once it starts boiling, you can just remove from the heat and add 1 cup of oil. So it can be any kind of cooking oil. Right here we do have, I believe it's canola oil. Yes. Okay, so the heat of this liquid mixture is going to be basically kind of cooking the dough as we mix it. You just need to pour it over. A bit of muscle here. So this is what it kind of looks like. So you just keep mixing it until it becomes a little more homogeneous. And once you do this, I think that this is a good point. I'm not sure if you can see this. So we would add the cheese. Then mix it. This will help to melt the cheese and mix it all together. So another option, you can use a mixer with a dough hook. Is that how you say it? So that might be a little easier because you don't have to use your muscles too much. But this is usually the way we do it back home. Okay. So it doesn't have to be completely melted, but as long as it's well incorporated, it should be good. So now you can add the eggs. Okay, so as we keep mixing the dough, it should come to a consistency where it won't be sticking to the walls or your hands as much anymore. So you are able to make little dough balls just like this. And this is what is gonna go in the oven. So there you go, you have your dough here. So you can make all of these, and you can also freeze them. And if you bake them frozen, they turn out perfectly just as if you had made them freshly. So this is what we're gonna do. That's why we made this big batch. So we could freeze and have some later for breakfast as an example. And it goes really well with coffee. And that's what usually Brazilian people have it with. Okay, so I think we're ready to put them in in the oven, so we can add to a greased pan and just make little balls that can be added to the pan. And you can make it as tiny or as big as you want. Sometimes some bakeries have like really big, like doughs, just like this size, but usually people like them smaller. Sometimes you can pair them up with some jelly, or in Brazil it's very common to have guava sweet that they add to the cheese bread. So it is a good combination. So there you go, it's ready. And the temperature of the oven, we want to have it at around 180 to 200 degrees Celsius, and that would be around 400 Fahrenheit. So we want to bake it just until it's kind of golden brown on the outside, and that should be your sign that it's ready to go.
The next day.
Hi everyone, so today we are back here with the frozen little buns. So it's very easy just to take them off, and because they're very solid, so we just set them here just like the freshly made buns. So all we need to do is add them in the oven, and okay, so yes, like we have the frozen buns in the oven right now, and let's say for instance you wanted to make them ahead of time just for the next day. Honestly, that is not a very good idea, just because the tapioca properties are different than regular flour, wheat flour, so they turn out very rock solid if you leave them overnight. So just as an example, you know, you see my hands are trying really hard, and this is the texture that they turn out to be. But there's hope. If you have a couple that you didn't eat, you can always put them in the microwave and they turn out to be very soft, but you have to eat them right away. So this is rock solid, and I just wanted to show you how solid this is. So you get to see how hard it gets. So don't make a big batch for the next day. The best thing is to make them freshly in the oven just before you're gonna eat them.
Well, today we learned lots about gluten-free baking, and I really enjoyed the buns. So thank you, Esther, for being on today's episode.
Oh, you're welcome. I was just wondering, how did you think of the buns?
I thought they were delicious.
Really? That's good to hear. That first batch that we tried was a little overcooked, but the second batch that we had tried yesterday with a little less time, what did you think?
Much softer and chewier, but both were good. I didn't actually mind the ones that were a little bit harder.
Oh, okay, that's good. So those who don't like things that are too hard, just make sure that it's just slightly golden brown, and then you can just take off. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that you like them.
It was lots of fun. Let us know if you give them a try in the comments below.